Welcome to Fishcracker Faith, where faith is bite-sized. A few weeks ago, we talked about using leaves to bear fruit. But that got me thinking, can you have too many leaves? As in, can you have too many devotions? Can you have too many religious practices? We all have that one friend or relative, especially if you're Filipino, who has one too many devotions. To my friends, that's probably me. These people are constantly flip-flopping from one devotion to another, like a Catholic version of nakikiin lang sa trend. On second thought, that's probably not me. Some of these people adopt new devotions the same way other people adopt the latest diet or health fad or TikTok trend. There's no depth to their devotion, only the feeling that they're doing something new. And because that's the only reason for their new devotion, there's no real fruit that comes out of it. As Jesus said, they have received their reward. And just as quickly as they take this new devotion up, they exchange it for the latest consecration, or the newest prayer challenge, or the trendiest scapular or medal. I use the word some very deliberately, because often people adopt new devotions because the old ones just aren't cutting it anymore. And good on them for wanting to enliven their spiritual life. They're trying to bear fruit. It's like a tree sprouting new leaves from a branch that's higher up the trunk. But then you look at the other end of the spectrum and find people who only do the rosary, or only attend daily mass, or only pray for 5 minutes throughout the day, whose fruit in their Christian life is undeniably abundant. These evidently holy people get by with just one singular pious act done faithfully throughout the day. Spiritual geniuses, if there ever was one. And humble too. Can you imagine if they added just one more pious act? How much more holy would they be? But again, it's not about how someone's holier than another, but about how close someone is to the object of their devotion. The way I asked my question probably gives away how I think about piety. But back to the topic at hand. So what's the deal? Can you really have too many leaves? Too many religious devotions? There's a few ways of looking at it. First, since we're talking about trees, we might as well look at what trees do. So when a seed starts to come to life, the first thing that it does is grow roots. It digs as deep into the ground as it could, soaking up moisture and nutrients from the soil, storing up energy until it bursts a tiny shoot. It actually takes a while in a tree's life cycle to start bearing fruit. And I think the same reality is true for us. To build abundant fruits, we need to plant our roots. And in the Christian life, the root stands for our core beliefs, traditions, dogma, doctrine, everything that a Christian stands for. Only once those roots are sufficiently planted do we begin to sprout shoots, little devotions that build our Christian life. Think about the first prayer you've memorized as a kid, or the first time you've ever did the sign of the cross, or the first moment you noticed everyone kneeling on the ground the moment a bell was rung and a circular host was raised by a weird guy wearing a weird outfit in front of the weird table. Shoots sprout on rooted soil. And so our devotions are dependent on what we believe in. If we believe that being in vogue is utterly important above all else, then the constant switching of devotions is not a bug, but a feature. And so is its barrenness. When we look at it this way, it doesn't really matter how many devotions you have. I mean, your devotions are dependent on what you believe. And it makes sense that the more you believe, the more devotions you take on. But are those devotions helping us bear the fruit of obedience to the Lord? I mean, if they are, more power to you. But if they aren't, then perhaps it isn't shoots you should be growing, but roots. Second, do you remember Jesus' parable of the vine? Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. I shudder at the thought of God pruning me. But it's part and parcel of being a follower of Christ. He prunes us to bear fruit. And in the same vein, we should look at our devotions with the eye of bearing fruit. Remember that leaves are meant for bearing fruit. But sometimes, we sprout leaves to sprout more leaves and adopt devotions to get more devotions, all at the expense of bearing fruit. There's a funny story that comes to mind. You see, recently, I started praying the rosary as part of my devotions during my prayer time. But at that morning, there were dishes that needed to be washed. So you know what I did? I put my head down, continued my prayers, and walked away, letting someone else take care of the dishes, because I ain't washing those dishes. See what happens? If your leaves aren't helping you bear fruit, you might want to prune it out of your life. Which leads to my final point. Leaves aren't a sign of holiness. Fruits are. And so, what's the use of gigantic leaves if it makes the smallest of fruits? If at all. There's this image of two rabbits next to two stalks of carrots. One of the rabbits had a huge stalk, and he held his head high while looking down at the other rabbit, who was beside a tiny stalk. But underground, where the rabbits can't see, we see that the rabbit with the huge stalk had a tiny carrot underground, while the rabbit with the tiny stalk had a huge carrot waiting for him. Talk about prioritizing the wrong things. We tend to mistake pious people for holy people, and sometimes they are the same person. But we also associate pious people with hypocrisy, because unfortunately, we've encountered far too many people who are. The truth is, we know that fruits are more important than leaves. But we keep encountering people with so many leaves who produce nothing. We expect there to be fruit where there are many leaves. And too many leaves with no fruit leave us utterly disappointed. Just like Jesus and the fig tree. So recap. First, we should plant our roots to raise our shoots, to bring out the fruits. Grow deeper with our traditions to strengthen our devotions, to reap the fruits of our virtues. Second, we need to prune what doesn't bear fruit. Third and final, we need to remember that leaves don't make a person holy. Fruits do. So it's not bad to have too many leaves. But without fruit, don't you think you have too many leaves? For wanting to enliven. There's a funny story that comes to mind. You see, recently, I added... Yeah! Bam! Bam!